A, B, and C are fundamentally created for a small group of people to extract their own benefit and to harm the future of our city.
San Antonio's past and present coming together. Former mayors joined current mayor Ron Nierenberg to clear up what they're calling misinformation about 3 propositions on this November ballot.
Good evening. Propositions A, B, and C turning into one of the most hard-fought races in this city. And
tonight, allegations of lies and dirty tricks are flying as people pour into the polls to cast early votes. Eyewitness News reporter Sue Calberg looked at the allegations and the facts.
The faith-based community gathered to say now more than ever, voters need to arm themselves with facts.
There is lots of lying.
Confusion's intentional, and I think we definitely have to take some responsibility to educate ourselves.
They're talking about allegations that phone banks and poll workers are deliberately misleading people.
Citizens, voters should not get caught up in that.
City and business leaders are behind a campaign urging a no vote on all 3 propositions, while firefighters want you to vote yes. There are allegations that a campaign is underway wrongly suggesting that a no vote supports the firefighters when the opposite is true. In a review of the facts, Proposition A, if approved, would change the rules for what kind of initiatives can be brought to voters, lower the number of signatures needed on petitions, and give petition drives more time to gather signatures. Prop B would change the rules regarding the hiring, pay, and term of service for any future city manager, and Prop C would require the city to participate in binding arbitration when contract disputes arise with the Professional Firefighters Association. You're telling people of faith, act, don't react.
Right. Act responsibly.
Make an informed decision. That's what's important. Do your homework.
At KENS5.com, you'll find a link with the locations of the 40 polling sites around the county where you can cast your vote. Sue Calberg, KENS 5, Eyewitness News.
And coming up tomorrow night, we'll take a closer look at the 2 annexation propositions for San Antonio.